has 5 kids, 4 of them enrolled in school choice, so he knows what it feels like from the parent side of the equation. He's on the Wisconsin Lutheran High School Board of Directors, worked for several Republican governor candidates, and for several different conservative public policy groups, and was legislative assistant to a Republican senator. Also with us is Lauren Greuel, and I hope I pronounced that.
Greuel.
How is it?
Greuel.
Greuel.
Yeah. It's a married name.
Did your folks ever tell you that there should be an O-I?
It's not my heritage, I don't know.
Nothing? Okay. Well, she is Associate Counsel at Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Deals with issues related to K-12 education, especially the fight for an education system that is student-centered and prioritizes the freedom of families to choose the best education for their children. And certainly that's what school choice is about. She attended Hillsdale College and following that Regent University School of Law, where she got her law degree. So, a nice round of applause, if you would.
Thank you. So Lauren's going to speak after me, then we're going to come up together. I believe you wanted to wait for questions to the end, so we don't drag you out here to 10:30, 11. He did tell me some people like to go on and talk, so just kidding. So thanks for reading my bio. No, it's a pleasure to be here in Green Bay area. This is an area of high school choice demand, and I'm going to tell you why throughout my presentation. But I speak to a lot of patriot groups. I haven't ever spoke to this patriot group. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the invite. And I've talked to a lot of you beforehand. It's a pleasure to meet folks I did. Just a few things, just handouts. I put handouts over there. This will a general description like our growth, our school choice size. In terms of this, the things I'm going to talk about today in my presentation. So, you got my background. I'll tell you how I got into school choice, because I got there actually accidentally. I grew up in inner city Milwaukee my entire life, for the most part of my entire life. Some of the roughest areas in Milwaukee. Went to Milwaukee Public Schools. Even if you never attended Milwaukee Public Schools, you know enough to know that Milwaukee Public Schools don't produce good outcomes and hasn't produced good outcomes all my life and probably before that. It's been quite a long time. Very dangerous schools. With the Bradley Tech High School, if you're familiar with Milwaukee, south side of Milwaukee. It was actually built by the Bradley Foundation, a conservative group. They did regret that later on, and they mentioned it to me many times. So I went to Milwaukee Public Schools. So I didn't get honestly, candidly, a good education growing up. I really did. My kids are different. I have 4 kids in a choice program. We're Wells Lutheran. I see a few Lutheran schools represented here. He said he had a daughter that attends Scout Council at Fox Valley Lutheran. We have I forgot your name, but her husband works at St. John's in Wrightstown, and very familiar with Fox Valley Lutheran in the area. But my kids have had how I ended up in school choice. I was in inner city Milwaukee. I had a 4-year-old. My oldest is 20. Kayla, she's my oldest. I have 20 to newborn. So 2 are out of school, 2 are currently in school, 1 is in mommy school. Whatever that consists of. So he's learning. When I was in inner city Milwaukee, I know my oldest was of school age at 4 or 5. We had no idea what choice was. I vowed to never send my kids to MPS because I remember where I went to school. At the time, I had no concept of what school choice was. I had no idea. I was not a conservative activist at the time. I wasn't even an activist of any sort. But I knew a lot of kids were getting their kids into private schools, and we knew a school down the street had a good reputation. It was called St. Marcus Lutheran. They served the same population as other city schools in Milwaukee. 90% poor, 90% black, 90% poverty levels. And they got great outcomes. They had a great reputation in the community for being very safe. It's a very conservative school. So all the stuff you see being taught in some of these public schools, we've never seen that in our churches. I've never been exposed to that in our schools. But we knew they had a good reputation, and we knew kids were getting their kids into the choice program, to some program, getting private tuition paid. And so we signed up for that, and lo and behold, St. Marcus, over 16 years, became our church. It's where I got married at. Became our home. I served in various capacities there as well, in the Welsh church. And so we're very fortunate, and my kids, I can tell you, to not be in Milwaukee public schools was a blessing to us, because they got to grow up in a very safe environment, never been exposed to drugs, fights, a lot of that stuff that happens in a lot of our schools that I've seen on a daily basis. They haven't seen their entire school careers. Knock on wood. So I want to give you two definitions of choice, because when I talk about school choice, I realize there's actually two definitions that I really have to cover. The general definition of school choice, which everybody supports. People say, oh yeah, I support school choice. And then there's that definition of just what is school choice, and then there's a programmatic version of it too under state law, and I'll talk a little bit about those today. Some of the barriers that's in the program, the income limits, and also just how the program works. The school choice on this surface is the basic principle that we're parents. We decide what is best for our children, especially for their education. They're going to spend 13, 14 years of their lives, inside of a school, or maybe been homeschooled. The school choice program, you cannot homeschool, but and we want to be the dictators of that decision. We're the closest parent there, and they're our children, and so that's the general conception of school choice. That's what we model. This is why the school choice program came about, because parents, obviously, if you're in a public school, you don't have choice unless you can pay out of pocket. You're assigned to your school district. Well, imagine if you don't have school choice in Milwaukee and you're poor, or you're going right to MPS, or you're homeschooling. If you can't homeschool, you're going right to MPS. And what happens? You're stuck. You're stuck there. So then there's a programmatic version that I'll go over today. Just a brief summary of who we are at School Choice Wisconsin. We're a member association. We represent hundreds of private schools that participate in Wisconsin's parental choice programs. We have 4 of them. We have one that started in Milwaukee. Let me go into that. One that started in Milwaukee in about the 90s. Actually a bipartisan program. Started by both Democrats and Republicans. Signed into law by Tommy Thompson. Our founder, Susan Mitchell, was one of the kind of like the activists behind it. But it's a bipartisan program. And actually, because Milwaukee is a Democratic city, one of the ladies, her name is Annette Polly Williams, she was a pioneer behind it as well. She was a Democratic state legislator. So this was a bipartisan program. It's less so today. But over the years, we expanded to Racine, we expanded statewide, and then we added the specialty scholarship program. And so we got school choice statewide, but there's limits. But in school choice, we represent all these private schools. What we are is we're kind of like their liaison between the government and just and how the program works. So on a daily basis, we deal with calls from the schools. So it's like how to navigate the program, because there's a lot of rules to the program. We'll talk about later in our presentation. But so far on your sheet, you can see, just to give you some cover, we got about 61,000 kids in the program, in all 4 programs. And I tell you, our chart, when you look at our charts of student growth, it looks just like this. It looks like the perfect stop. It just goes up and up. And that shows overall demand for school choice. That's how I look at it. More and more demand for school choice. If we didn't have some of these barriers in the program, we'll have even more people in the program. We have about 441 schools now in the program. A little bit over 430. Don't quote me on that. 68% of the private schools participate in school choice. And you'll see our demographics is pretty interesting. It's very as diverse as it gets. It's the third white, third black, third Latino of all the populations that participate in school choice. A third, and like 1% other. So that's a brief. So yeah, there you go. 24, 25. Those are probably the wrong presentation, but that's the growth in the programs. You see different color schemes. The Milwaukee program obviously started very early on. Then we added the Racine program, which is in red. The Wisconsin program, which covers your school districts here in the Northeast. And then the specialty scholarship program, which has grown too. Obviously, you see the Wisconsin program has grown tremendously as it covers statewide. So the voucher amount, just to give you a brief understanding of how the school choice program works. You sign up for it. You have to qualify by income limits. I did put that, you do have that sheet in front of you. You can see what the income limits are. That's for the Wisconsin program that benefits you. But this is what you get. You get a voucher. That's essentially what the school choice program is. You sign up, you get a voucher that covers the cost of tuition. At the K-8 level, it's $10,500. At the 9 through 12 level, it's 13,000. And that would increase, obviously next year. And there's a special needs scholarship program voucher, which is a little more, but I'll just cover the Wisconsin program because that's where you guys are based out of. So simple requirements: you got to be at school age, you have to live here, and then you have to qualify based on income. This is the one main barrier with the choice program are the income limits. There are, especially in the Wisconsin program, the income limits are much different, and you can see from this sheet than the Milwaukee program. Milwaukee program is based on 300% of the poverty level. The Wisconsin program is based on 220% of the poverty level. So if you look at a family of 4 married in Milwaukee, if you make $100,000, you can qualify. You make under $100,000. In the Wisconsin program, that same family size, you have to make under $77,730. The reason the differences are is just there's no actually real concrete reason. It's just when they were negotiating the bill politically, it's just what we got. We got something. You know, the Wisconsin program is better than nothing. But obviously, we like the parallel long-term. Well, we don't like the income limits, period, at school choice. We're like universal school choice for everyone. Our thing is school choice for all families. The barrier is a big hurdle, especially in the Wisconsin program, and especially in certain municipalities that are higher income. One of our other speakers live in Mequon. Almost nobody in Mequon qualifies for this program. You can't be a family of 4 in level 7. I don't think you can rent an apartment here in Mequon. It's a higher income place. There's probably some places up here too, as well. So that's the number one barrier we hear is that parents, especially middle class families, you look at this, I mean, a family of 4 that makes $77,000, in today's time, that's not a lot of money by any means. I mean, that is lower middle class for the most part. And we have a lot of parents who would like their kids to have more options, but they don't qualify. So we do on a daily basis, we try to fight for this. Obviously, we have a governor who doesn't support it. So you have to find the right people in place who actually would support breaking the income limits. So the income limits is usually the largest barrier when we get on the phone. Over a lot of the calls we get are from people who just really don't qualify, and they're trying to find out how to qualify. There's nothing much you can do if you're over the income, or there's nothing you can do if you're over the income limits. You just can't. You just have to pay out of pocket, or you go to the district you're assigned. And you got a lot of families, again, they got 4 kids. They can't afford tuition for 4 kids. But they're cut out of choice because of these income limits. So that's a big barrier I want you to really consider, and it probably affects the Wisconsin program greatly. That limits the amount of people that can participate in it as well. This is another weird, arbitrary, because you're a very smart group, this is a, usually I don't go over this too much with activist organizations because it's a very hard barrier to understand, but it's one of the most weirdest barriers that exist that we get complaint after complaint after complaint about, and that's the grade point entry points. It's a weird barrier that says you can't go from like private school. So if you send your kids to a private school, say they're in 2nd grade, you know, you're private paying out of pocket. And and maybe you qualify for choice. You end up qualifying for choice. Maybe you don't know choice exists, or maybe you just, you lose a job or your income goes down and you qualify for choice. It's like, well, I qualify for choice. And the whole premise of choice is the tax dollars follow you. That's the whole concept we want to get to future-wise, is the money follows you, because you're already assigned a number, no matter what. But if you send your kids to, private school, you pay out of pocket, or you're paying property taxes to the public school district, and then you're cutting a check to the private school as well. Generally, going forward, we'd like the money just to follow the child, be assigned backpack funding, which people may know. But this barrier, you can't go from like private pay to private choice. You can only do it at K4, K5, 1st grade, and 9th grade. I deal with this almost a daily basis. I at least get one call, some parent who maybe has a 5-year-old. They want to get them in K5. And they have a 2nd grader. And the K4 kid qualifies if they meet the income limits. But the 2nd grader will not. And so the parent has to kind of like split up the kids into different schools. Or they have to go work around and send that 2nd grader to a public school for 1 year and change them back to a private school the next year, or homeschool 1 year, and then go back into the private school. You can't go from private pay to private choice outside of those K4, K5, 1st grade, or 9th grade. It's a weird barrier. It's the one that schools even hate the most. They complain about the most because the one they deal with the most. And it's the one that kind of breaks up families within the school. And sometimes I coach parents, so it's like, listen, If you qualify for choice and you know you're going to qualify the following year, you have to do that. Just what I told you. You got to send one kid to this school, and then you take that other kid out, you put them in public, and then you come back into the private school. It's hard to work that around. You got logistical problems, and you got your kids in 2 different schools, all because of this, a little barrier. When the principle is the money should follow the child. And again, our goal at School Choice is to eliminate these barriers. So we unfortunately have to tell parents this all the time. And I took a lot of calls on this today, about 3 of them. And it's always heartbreaking because these parents can't afford private school. And they're like, my public schools aren't great. I don't want to send my kids to public school. And they have no idea what to do. They say, well, we don't have the money to go to what do you do in that situation? They can't homeschool either. Again, this is the sheet, this is the income limits. You can see the difference in the Wisconsin program. Again, look at that. That's $25,000 difference. All because of, imagine if you live where I live and like, I'm in Brown Deer, but if you live in, say, Wauwatosa, or let's say Milwaukee and West Dallas, 2 cities, working class cities, lower income. If you live across the street in West Dallas, your family of 4, your income limits are reduced by a quarter. And so that's just, and that barrier only exists because that's how it was wrote into law. One provision that we have in law, and this is a great one, this is one that benefited me, is once in, you're always in. So, oftentimes, especially as conservatives, we want people, especially if you're lower income, we want people to make more money. We want people to get better jobs. We want people to progress in society, in the world, right? And so the program actually, this is one of the good things about the program is that it doesn't limit you. So if you do qualify under the income limits and your kids is in the choice program, you do not have to stay under the income limits every year. Once you're in, you're always in. So this affected me because when I got my kids in the program, I was well under the poverty limits. But I'm well over now. I'm doing better now. I progressed. So technically, I wouldn't qualify for choice if I was to sign up now. One of my kids, but they were already in the program. My son, my little 7-month-old, he's far from school age, but he wouldn't qualify if there's income limits, something like that. So once in, always in. So parents always ask this question: hey, do I have to stay under these? No. You can make a lot more money, and you're always in, unless you leave the program. Then you have to requalify. So that's a very good provision, and it makes sense, and that keeps families intact. This is for, this is generally for schools. I'll cover this briefly. It's how you apply. One thing about the choice program, and one thing we've been negotiating and dealing with, and we have some progression on this recently, is when they apply, most people think about applying to schools in like May, June, July. Not January and February, in the middle, smack in the middle of the school year. But in our schools, you have to start applying in February. Now, I serve on the Wisconsin Lutheran High School Board. Our school has 1 enrollment period for the Milwaukee program because we have a lot of demand. So we get more applications than we have seats available. So you have February 1st and 20th to apply. And to be honest, sometimes we get a story of a parent who got their kids into a school like Wisconsin Lutheran, very hard to do, especially because it's so competitive, and they forget to do that application. Or they forget to submit a residency document. And these are parents who can't afford the $13,000, $14,000 check out of pocket. And they're like, you get into a good school like that, and then it's just matters out of luck. And so we, now this is for when schools apply. It shouldn't have been in there, but here it is. Here's the open application windows. The Milwaukee program is pretty easy. You can apply every month, except January. Racine program is a little more expansive. She gave me the wrong presentation. This has changed just like a month or 2 ago. You can now, actually this is an improvement, you can apply every month in a Wisconsin program. And I only say this because if you got kids or grandkids, maybe they're attending a public school, if they don't like, maybe, talk to, your grandkids, and it's like, and they're interested in choice, you can obviously contact me. I can help you with that. But the application periods are open now. The first one closes tomorrow, February 1st through 20th. So that last one is wrong. It's an old slide. And this is something that's actually good too. We had caps in the program recently. These are annual caps of how many students can leave the school district and go into a private school. One way to look at this is like when you see these, it's only 4 school districts that hit the cap. None are in your area: Manitowoc, Reesville, Watertown, and West Dallas. I think Reesville is Sauk County. But yeah, Watertown, West Dallas, Manitowoc. Usually you tell the schools that hit the caps is where there's oftentimes a lot of issues. There's a lot of demand to leave the school district. And I can tell you, I get a lot of calls on grade point entry points, income levels. The other calls I get is in West Dallas. Parents in West Dallas who want to leave the West Dallas school district but cannot go into a private school. This is the last year of the caps. So now the caps break off. So now there's no more caps on participation to the choice program. So this is a hurdle we have overcome. So it's the caps are lifted 26, 27. So now you got a lot of them kids in West Dallas who've been on waiting lists forever, will now have a chance to get into a private choice school. And they qualify. They qualify by income. They were just restricted because of some arbitrary cap put in place. And I was part of a negotiation to get at least something out of choice. But Manitowoc too, and Watertown. In those 2 areas, their superintendents do not like choice one bit, obviously, because they see choice as competition. I've seen some recent articles of their superintendents writing in papers just like this choice program is just killing us. Really, what he's saying is parents want to leave our school district and they want to go somewhere else because they want a better product. The reasons why people often, I never left a public school and sent my kids to private school, but oftentimes a lot of parents do. It depends where you're at. Reasons why they generally do, if you're in Milwaukee, sometimes it's safety. Safety is a big, huge factor. I don't know if you guys get like Dan O'Donnell and Mark Bell and all the people up here, if you get that up here, but they cover it a lot. Will covers it a lot. They can probably, Badger Institute covered a lot. The number of 911 calls, you get to like some of these MPS schools, parents, I don't care what income level, a lot of them know these schools are unsafe. Safety is a big complaint we get for why parents leave public schools. Obviously academic standards, and then some of the stuff they're teaching. All the stuff that Will does a great job on. If anybody's exposing all this stuff is Will. Will's probably a nuisance to the open records request offices of these people but they're doing all the bad activity, they're just exposing it. They're just showing it, highlighting it. So those are often reasons why people leave. And some people just leave simply because like, hey, I want my kids to get a Catholic education. I left because of academic standards, safety. I said, no way I'm sending my little 4-year-old girl into MPS. I just couldn't do it. Me and her mother agreed on that. So our schools are accredited. Public schools are not. I don't know what happened to this presentation. Our schools are accredited, public schools are not. That's a process we have to go through every 5 years that your husband has to go through. Very costly. Our staff credentials, public school teachers are licensed. Our teachers require a bachelor's degree from an accredited institution. This is one thing that a lot of our opponents of school choice schools want to do. They want to license our teachers. Now, every teacher in a public school is licensed. Every teacher in Milwaukee public schools are licensed. West Dallas public schools. I mean, I don't measure licensing by academic outcomes. I know people always joke, they always said, Mark Zuckerberg can never teach in a school. If he wanted to teach you how to build a social media app, he wouldn't be allowed to if he wanted to be a teacher. Well, that's true. He wouldn't be a teacher in our schools either because he actually dropped out of college. But all you need is a bachelor's degree from an accredited institution. They do want to license our teachers. That will hurt us. That would be a large if, and that's generally the anti-school choice opponents. If they were to assume one body of the assembly or the Senate, and they start putting things in and if you get a governor who's anti-choice, they can start putting certain things in the budget process to really hurt us. And licensing teachers will be challenging because we already have a challenge. Everybody has a challenge of finding teachers. It's a challenge for everyone. But our teachers have bachelor's degrees, and I do always joke, especially because I talk to a lot of our teachers in my church. We're not on pensions like MPS. We don't take the salaries they do. We do the work for less. We do the work obviously for greater mission. A lot of our teachers do. I always say they take the Jesus discount. That's what we always say. Curriculum. This is an important part I really want to discuss. So our choice schools are not required to include, the curriculum, any concept, topic, or practice in conflict with the program's religious doctrines. We have religious freedom in our schools, and we do. This is something we at School Choice Wisconsin always on alert to protect. Any threats. Because we're church, most of our schools are churches, Catholic, Lutheran, a lot of non-denominational Baptists. There's a few non-church private schools, but most of them are churches. And the last thing you want is government dictating curriculum, especially when they start attaching things because if your school participates in a program and you take the voucher, they start attaching things because you're taking now, they say government money. There's no such thing as government money. Government is just a document. It's an entity, a great entity, our Constitution, but at the end of the day, it's a document. We're the government. We work. That's how the government gets its money. Our philosophy, we never argue on that frame, is that this is government money you're taking. No, this is a parent choosing to take their tax dollars and send it to a private school. That's exactly what's happening, and that's what the Supreme Court has said too. Obviously, they're more capable of talking about the legalism, but we won on that many years ago, a couple of decades ago, in the Supreme Court. And again, I want to emphasize the curriculum. We determine a lot of our curriculum in our schools. It's really important to us because the whole point of purpose of being private is to be able to offer a market. And if you don't like the product we offer at a school, you just go to a different school. That's the whole concept of choice and having a market. And that was Milton Friedman's concept. Milton Friedman has actually kind of created the concept behind the voucher program. In his Free to Choose series, if you remember those from the 80s. This was kind of like his idea. Now we're transitioning more to the ESA model now. A lot of the other states, education savings accounts, kind of works like a health savings account. But he was a concept behind it, and the whole idea behind it was, and he was talking about New York public schools at the time, and some other major city public schools. It's like, in order to get better education, we have to do like with any market. You introduce competition into that marketplace, and we needed competition in the education marketplace, and that's what we offer. That's why a parent can leave a public school, go to a private school. In a public school, in a private school, obviously gets that voucher. We do have a religious opt-out provision. Not many parents take advantage of it. You hear a lot of our naysayers, especially, this is one senator I know who well, his name is Chris Larson. He's the most anti-school choice guy you can possibly find. I mean, he went to it, actually, he wasn't a choice student, but he went to a private school that participates in the school choice program called Thomas More. Very good school, a Catholic school on the south side of More. But he's at least he's honest. He really tells us he really opposes the choice program, and he makes it very clear. But one of the critics that he always uses is that money shouldn't be going to religious institutions. And so we actually have a religious opt-out provision. Again, most people who send their kids to a school, when you tour our school at Wisconsin Lutheran High School, you're going to see Jesus everywhere. You're going to see crosses everywhere. You're going to have to sit down in a presentation where we sit down with you and say, marriage is between one man, one woman. This is what we believe as a Welsh church, and then you take it or leave it. This is the whole concept of a choice, right? Not many people take advantage of it. Very few kids take advantage of that. Families take advantage of religious opt-out, which, again, a lot of our parents choose to go to religious schools because they want their kids to have a faith value education, because that's another component of educating a child. It's not just math, science. We got to bring you into the world the right way. That's what we do at our kids' school. That's all. It's more for schools. Fundraising, volunteer services, we cannot force, I know a lot of private schools, a few of you are private schools here, we cannot force private schools who take the voucher to participate, but a lot of them volunteering services. I've been volunteering in the school, forever, and so. We are required, we get this question a lot, especially at conservative events, do you have to do testing? Yeah, we're required to do testing. If you have 20 or more students participate, in any of those grades, they test in a board exam, 3rd to 11th grade. But parents can opt out. So again, another choice. And many parents do. Some parents opt out. And schools do other type of testing too, but that's a state requirement. Our choice report cards, for the most part, are on DPI's website. They're not as, the whole report card thing is a whole other convoluted mess. I don't know what is what. Will does a lot of work on it. We don't get any questions from parents on report cards. The best report card, for if you send your kids to a school, a private school, is to go to the school. Be an active parent. Go to the school, and you have to do that. A lot of our schools require you to tour their schools first. because they want to meet you. They want to know who they're serving, and they want to know the needs you have to serve. You just can't just sign up and just come. A lot of our schools, again, require you to tour and to meet with them. But that's the best report card, I find. That's what I educate parents. I said, listen, especially in Milwaukee, we have kids, parents who need help. Hey, which school do I go to? There's in Milwaukee and then other areas, there's so many you can choose between. I can sit you here for the next year or two talking about it, but the best report card is going to a school and figuring out what works for you. And you know the needs of your kids, so you can better cater to them based on that. This is another thing our opponents do. You don't serve special needs. We serve many special needs. We serve special needs kids. We don't even count them because we just serve them because this, our goal is to serve our children, and our students that come in our schools. So we do take special needs kids. Eric Siri here, my kids is under the special needs scholarship program. His kids are under the special needs scholarship program. He has one kid underneath the special needs scholarship program. That's a separate program than a choice program. So any of you have grandkids, kids that have an IEP, there are no income limits in that program. I should have prefaced that earlier. The special needs scholarship program, it's not technically a choice program, it's a scholarship program, but there are no income limits there. So if you have any kids or grandkids that have maybe an IEP, you can see me, I can help you. There's special needs schools that participate in the special needs scholarship program if you're not satisfied with where your kids or grandkids are at. But we take special needs students all the time. And we take special needs students that technically don't even have an IEP. We did a report with Will, I think a year or two ago. We did it actually twice, 2023, 2025, that showed we actually served a lot more special needs kids than DPI counts. This is another thing I confronted Chris Larson with at a town hall. It's like, hey, you keep quoting this number that we don't serve special needs. I'm like, Chris, I have the data from DPI. He just refuses to look at it. Oh, well. And so we can't win everybody over, right? But we won a public. I will say this. If you look on there, you'll see 6 out of 10 voters, and that's a lower number. 68%, 7 out of 10 voters support school choice. There's so much popularity in this program. It's the one program that even our opponents don't attack as much as other issues. And I would say on the right, speaking to conservatives and libertarians, is any liberals here? No, I'm just joking. It's always one, right? Walking around, so we don't know. They haven't, revealed themselves. But this is the one issue that a lot of them don't touch because there's most families that take advantage of it come from inner city Milwaukee, largely in heavy Democratic areas. Green Bay is a heavy Democratic area, and there's a lot of demand up here. And so this is the one issue I'll say on the right where we're united on, and there's a lot of issues we fight on the right, and we should have those fights. This is the one issue where I don't face any resistance among the right. Very few. If it do get any resistance, it's usually because it's not conservative enough. But this is the one issue even our opponents are afraid to attack because it's so popular. If you were trying to get rid of the choice program, there's no way you can't, Milwaukee Public Schools, Green Bay Schools, Oshkosh, Appleton, they can't even absorb a lot of the kids that would leave the private school. They don't have the infrastructure or place or seats to do it. That's what gives our program a lot of, I would say, a lot of credibility and a lot of strength is that there's a lot of demand for it across party lines. I talked about the special needs scholarship program. That voucher is $15,700. Obviously, the needs to educate a student who has special needs is a little more. So that voucher is a little more. One thing I didn't mention about the voucher is that the voucher technically does not cover the full cost of education. A lot of people do not know that, even our strongest supporters. It often does not cover the full cost. If you notice, private schools have galas and fundraisers. The reason they have those is to cover the difference between what they get in the voucher and what the actual cost of education really costs. I know at our school, when I serve in the Wisconsin Lutheran High School Board, it's about close to 17. And we offer a lot of services. The voucher we get is 13. So there's a $4,000 gap there. We have to make that up somehow. And then you add that times how many students we have in the program, about 500 to 600, don't quote me on that, but times that by 4,000, that's the gap. That's a large gap. We have to fundraise for it. And and we fundraise for it. And our churches give us money for it. We do a lot of ministry for it as well. So, yeah, that's the voucher for the Special Needs Scholarship Program. We go through audits. We was talking about audits earlier today. We go through multiple audits to make sure just, hey, if we're serving, we got 20 students in the program, we're actually serving 20 students. We're not getting a check for 20 students and only serving 10. We go through multiple audits. We're a heavily regulated program. Heavily regulated, too regulated, and we'll talk about the regulation later. This is for schools. This is for schools. So this is where we are. We're located in Brookfield, but we're located statewide. I want to mention something specifically about the Green Bay area. We have the Grace schools over here. Green Bay Area Catholic Education. You've probably heard of them. Obviously, we got a lot of other schools around here too as well. It's an area of just great demand in Green Bay. You know, and you know your public school districts. I didn't go to Green Bay Public School District. You pay more attention to your public school district than I do. But we're serving a lot of kids in these schools in this area, and we get better outcomes. You can see from some of our data, there's actually a sheet with 3 QR codes. If you really want to see, hey, because what matters is the outcome at the end of the day. Not just having choice, giving parents choice, but hey, how are these schools actually doing compared to public schools or charter? And again, we're for choice for everything. You want to send your kids to a charter, public, homeschool, the parent makes that decision. But Will does their apples to apples report. I don't know if they have it back there, but they have it on their website. We did a cost effectiveness. We do a lot of studies with Will. This is what we're speaking today. We partner with Will a lot, so we call them a lot, and we rely on them a lot, and they've been a great resource for us at School Choice. But there's a QR code on there. You can really study the cost effectiveness of the program. You're getting a lot more for your dollar in a choice program than you are vis-a-vis public. And the cost of education is lower. And I leave you with this, one reason why it's lower. Our schools are, again, a lot of them are churches, as your husband is. We got churches, we got schools where the pastor is a pastor, leading the church. He's the administrator, he or she, yeah, he's the administrator. I said he or she, he's the administrator, I'm sorry. Teacher, in a whole host of roles. Our administration cost is significantly cheaper. And I talk to our schools and I say, hey, what do you try to get a better understanding? Is really, we don't kind of calculate our administration costs. They're just significantly lower. It's just we're there to serve. And so we don't have, even at our kids' school, we're a big school, we're a big choice school at Wisco. We don't have all these assistants to assistant people, all these salaries at 6 figures that you have in these layers of bureaucracy you have in some of these schools. We don't have that. So we're able to educate kids for less. So you as a taxpayer, maybe you don't have kids in a choice program. You want to, wait, how does this affect my property taxes? We save property taxpayers a significant amount of money because the cost of education at our schools is much cheaper vis-a-vis public schools. If you live in Green Bay, you may see anybody live in Green Bay? Actually, city Green Bay proper? Okay, one person? All right. So you may see on your property tax bill, they put a property tax insert inside there that would lead you to believe that the choice program is raising your property taxes. Obviously, they were put in by the public school board. Obviously, the public school board sees choice as competition. So, obviously they have an implicit bias to lead you to believe that our cost of a voucher is, ask them how much their per pupil amount is in their total revenue. You can go on Will's website. Will has a nice little website that Will Flanders, Will from Will, put up that can give you the cost for all your school districts. You can go on their website and see that. And then you look at the cost of the voucher, which I just gave you. The cost of education is lower. So your money, as taxpayers, and I know you're a good conservative patriot group that cares a lot about having a smaller government, having low taxes. I don't believe in any taxes, especially income taxes. But you all want lower taxes. We deliver that for you. So as much as you can spread the word about school choice from a values perspective as a parent or grandparent, and also from a public policy standpoint in terms of the outcomes we get and how we save taxpayers money. So we save you money. The more kids going to our schools, the more money we save in your property taxes. But overall, the better parents have when they have options, when they have freedom. That's what we're here. We're here for freedom, right? That's what we support as conservatives, as principled people, is freedom. And giving parents that freedom so they're not trapped into failing school districts. They're not trapped into a system. And kids, no matter if they're poor, lower middle class, affluent, they can choose the best outcomes for their kids. And that's what we stand for at School Choice. We would like you to stand for that in your communities. So spread the word, and I'm going to pass it to Lauren. And so she's going to take over to the second presentation, and I'm going to go up there and set it up back there. Thank you very much.
While you're switching over, is that a picture of a choice school there that is on the screen?
That's a great question for Chris.
No, that's just a simple background. Sorry.
While we're getting set up here as well, I will just mention, Chris mentioned one of our reports at Will called Apples to Apples. And that report is done by our PhD researcher, who is absolutely phenomenal. And he takes the demographics of choice schools and the demographics of public schools and compares them so it's actually apples to apples. Because as we talked about, there is a really diverse group of kids in choice schools. So it's really important that when you're comparing test scores and you're comparing how these kids are doing, you're taking into account some of these external factors. That new updated Apples to Apples report for 2026 for the 2025 school year will be coming out on Wednesday. So you can look forward to that new report.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I don't know what happened.
You had it.
I'm sorry.
It's all good. Well, my slides are a little more visual anyway, just to give you something to look at as I'm talking. So I'll get into the intro for Will and some of that information while they're working on the tech stuff. So, as Ron mentioned, thank you so much for having me this evening. My name is Greuel. I'm Associate Counsel at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. I focus primarily on K-12 litigation and policy issues. And tonight I'm going to be talking to you about some of the battles that choice schools are facing in Wisconsin. Primarily the federal tax credit scholarship program, DPI Overregulation, which Chris alluded to during his presentation as well, and an effort that we've been referring to as decoupling, which could theoretically solve the issue that we're seeing with the property tax bills that Chris mentioned that's being added to the Green Bay School District. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Will is a 501c3 nonprofit litigation and policy firm based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We work to advance limited government, free speech, transparency, and education reform. So I'm going to briefly go over each of these battles that we have going on. The Federal Tax Credit Scholarship Program, DPI regulation and overreach, and decoupling, and then we'll do some Q&A. Chris will come back up and we'll do that together so you can ask questions about his presentation and mine, or anything else in choice education that you want to talk about. So, we're starting with the Federal Tax Scholarship Program. How many of you in the room have heard of the Federal Tax Scholarship Program? Okay, at least a couple. That's good. That's awesome. This program was passed as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill that I'm sure you were all hearing lots about over the summer. This is a tax credit that allows taxpayers to receive a dollar-for-dollar federal income tax credit of up to $1,700 a year for donations to eligible scholarship granting organizations, or SGOs. The purpose of this tax credit is to expand educational options and opportunities for families across all types of schools, public, private, charter, all of them. So to understand how this works, you'll need to understand a little bit more about SGOs. I'm sure you're all like, what is that? That doesn't make any sense. So this is an organization that provides scholarships to a minimum of 10 students. It has to be a 501c3 located in the state where the scholarships are going. Each year, 90% of the funds given to these SGOs have to go to eligible students, and SGOs may not earmark funds for particular students. If an SGO meets all of those requirements, the governor or other designated official must submit a list of SGOs to the U.S. Department of Treasury, and then donations made to SGOs on that list would qualify for the federal tax credit. And these SGOs can use the money for a variety of things. Right now, in Wisconsin, the existing parental choice programs may only be used for the cost of tuition at participating schools, and as Chris talked about, it often doesn't actually cost the entirety of educating those children. So what's really cool about this federal tax scholarship program is that the funds can be used for more than just tuition. It can be academic tutoring, special needs services, books, supplies, room and board, uniform, transportations, technology, a whole bunch of different things. And SGOs are organizations that can be set up to serve different students with different needs. So an SGO organization could choose to serve low-income students or students with special needs by providing therapies or tutoring or specialized services that aren't covered in traditional public funding. Or an SGO could set up something targeted at STEM and literacy programs, and then use the SGO money for that. But it's really the sky is the limit on what this can be used for by SGOs. Then, and this is where you guys would come in, if you make a donation to an SGO, then when you go to file your federal taxes, which I'm sure many of you in the room are either in the process of doing or already have done, or maybe are just waiting until April 15th to do, you would be able to subtract up to $1,700 from how much you owe if you donated the maximum amount. So what's really cool too is if you owe less than $1,700 on your federal taxes that year, the unused portion can be carried forward as a credit for up to 5 years. So this program is a phenomenal way to reward citizens for donating to scholarship programs. There is no cost to the state. This scholarship program is completely funded through through private donations, incentivized by a federal tax credit. Participation in this program does not affect the Wisconsin budget at all. I already briefly touched on this, but again, the funds can be used for a whole host of different things. They're much more flexible than a lot of the funding that is currently used for both public and private schools. And the eligibility for students receiving this funding is much higher than what the income limits are right now with the traditional choice program. So eligibility for this program is set at 300% of the area median income. So even in those higher income communities, middle class families can still receive this scholarship through SGOs, which is really cool. You might be thinking, this sounds really great. Almost too good to be true. So what's the catch? Unfortunately, in order to participate in this program, states need to opt in. To do this, the governor must decide to participate. The map on your screen shows which governors in which states have already opted in or have said that they're going to opt in. States in blue have opted in. States in orange are where the governor has specifically said he will not opt in. You can see what color Wisconsin is there on the screen. In an interview with Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel on September 4th, 2025, Evers said that this program would be catastrophic to the public school system. He said, "We have plenty of voucher schools, we don't need voucher money." That's obviously a misunderstanding of what this program is, and if he had read our report on it, he would know that. By the way, if you want to read the report, I brought it. It's on that back table if you want to grab it. But now he's in a really tough position. Does Tony Evers admit that he didn't understand the program and he was wrong? A politician admitting they were wrong? Unlikely. Seems unlikely. But the alternative is that he digs his heels in and then no students in Wisconsin receive this money, which doesn't make any sense. This is a bipartisan issue, actually, that it seems Governor Evers just spoke too quickly on before fully understanding it, and it may cost Wisconsin students. Another interesting part of this program as a whole is that nothing prevents taxpayers in Wisconsin from donating to SGOs in other states. So if you, for example, have grandkids in another state and you want to donate to an SGO that would give scholarship money to those student schools, you can do that, and you can claim the tax credit. So really what Governor Evers has done is essentially say, I'm going to allow everybody to send their tax dollars to other states for education, which is really, really unfortunate. This makes Evers opting in doubly terrible. It's just awful. So the question becomes, is hope lost for Wisconsin to participate in this great program? A program that benefits private schools and public schools alike. As mentioned earlier, this Evers statement in September seemed to be based on a misunderstanding of what this actually does. There are groups in Wisconsin that are actually currently working with him and trying to kind of talk him off a ledge. So we'll see if that works. I'm not sure it will. Another option is delegating the authority to opt in to someone else. So the federal law actually allows the governor or someone else designated by law to opt in. So in order to do just that, this session passed both the Assembly and the Senate a bill to make it that an agency in the Wisconsin government would make this decision as opposed to Tony Evers, or whoever the governor is. So that passed the Assembly, passed the Senate, sitting on his desk, waiting to be signed. So we'll see what happens there, but because it's a bill, it still has to be signed in by Governor Evers. So he's still kind of making a decision there anyway. Another thing to keep in mind is we actually do have a governor race coming up here in November. So as I'm sure you're all very well aware, but by January of 2027, we'll have a new governor. And this is something that I think is a good question for the candidates that are currently running. Would this be something that you would support? Because this benefits all students in Wisconsin. And then the last point I have on the screen, because I think it's important, is just because we as a state don't opt in this 2027 eligibility year doesn't mean we can never opt in. So while I would, of course, prefer that students are able to access funds from this program as soon as possible, it doesn't negate the fact that we could opt in later. So that's one of the battles that I wanted to cover today. It's important for both public and private students, and is something that's worth asking if you get door knockers or anything else. Does this candidate support this program? Because it's really good for everybody involved. All right, so shifting focus from federal to more of a state issue, I wanted to touch on DPI overregulation. So while critics of the school choice program argue that private schools lack accountability, primarily our friend Chris Larson, schools participating in the choice programs are actually subject to substantial regulation and mandates, and Chris went over some of them. But from 2009 to 2024, there's been a significant increase in the number of regulations for choice programs. You can see that on your screen here. The Milwaukee Parental Choice Program was actually named the most regulated in the country by EdChoice. But even in years since that quote-unquote award, that regulation has only increased. And many of these state mandates and regulations do not include an analysis of how this would actually affect choice schools. It's often just tagged on because it's something that's being added as a requirement for public schools. This is obviously a problem because school choice programs are supposed to provide a diverse educational option for parents to choose so that their children can attend a school that best fits their needs. The DPI continues to increase this massive amount of regulation, and it would just limit school choice options for parents and for students. This increase in regulation has only been made worse recently by our Wisconsin Supreme Court. In a decision called Evers versus Markline 2, because there was an Evers versus Markline 1, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction is a state agency. that's allowed to create and pass rules to further regulate schools in Wisconsin, so they're affected by this ruling as well. This Department of Public Instruction and other government agency rulemaking process, when done correctly, effectively creates new laws that schools, both public and private, have to follow. So when the DPI creates a rule, it doesn't necessarily have to pass the Assembly and the Senate and be signed by the governor to become law. They can go through a rulemaking process, and those rules have the effect of law for schools. For many, many years, even the DPI or any other state agency, if they passed a particularly problematic rule, the legislature's Joint Committee on Review of Administrative Rules, or JCRER, could pause, object, or suspend the rule until the legislature had a chance to correct it, to respond to it. However, this Markline case made it so that JCRER couldn't suspend rules, and now unelected bureaucrats in the Department of Public Instruction can jam any terrible rule that they want through the rulemaking process, and schools must follow them as if they're law, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. So this is pretty terrible across the board, because that's not just the DPI. That's any government agency in Wisconsin now can pass any rule without any legislative oversight. So what can be done about that? That's a pretty awful ruling. Will supports this constitutional amendment. It's Assembly Joint Resolution 133, which proposes a constitutional amendment that would restore legislative oversight by allowing the legislature to suspend an administrative rule in whole or in part through a joint resolution passed by both the Assembly and the Senate. However, in order to pass a constitutional amendment, and you guys might be aware of this, it must pass through both the Assembly and the Senate in consecutive sessions, legislative sessions, before it's even placed on the ballot. And then it's placed on the ballot, and the entire state of Wisconsin votes on it. So as of yesterday, AJR 133 passed both the Assembly and the Senate for the first time, and will move into a second consideration during the 2027-28 legislative term. If it passes again, then the good people of Wisconsin will vote on whether or not this should be added to our Wisconsin Constitution as a check on unelected bureaucratic power. This is a little bit of a plug for a project that doesn't have to do entirely with education, which is what I'm focusing on tonight, but Will is doing something that we're referring to as the red tape reset, which has to do with all of this bureaucratic overreach. And if you're interested in some of our other projects that have to do with this, you can visit redtapereset.com. All right, so the constitutional amendment should help fix the Markland problem, but what about all the additional rules and laws that are put on schools by the DPI? What can you do about that? This is where Will steps in a lot to help private schools in a variety of contexts. And while there are lots of examples I can give of DPI overreach where Will has gotten involved, I'm going to just give two of our more recent and significant examples. The first one is this one, the Perfection Rule lawsuit. So in order to apply for the choice program, parents have to fill out an application and then supply a document that shows their residential address. DPI, by a guidance document, not by rulemaking, came up with a list of what documents for residency are acceptable. In addition to this strict list, parents began having applications denied because their address or name didn't match their residency documents exactly. So the DPI essentially created an unlawful rule that the residency document had to be something specifically when nothing in the administrative rules or statutes said that, and that the application had to match perfectly, which is why we refer to this lawsuit as the Perfection Rule lawsuit. Will took this issue to court, arguing that because the DPI didn't go through the rulemaking process to impose these additional regulations on parents applying to the program, it was unlawful, and the court agreed. So now we're in a state where the DPI had to walk back a lot of this unlawful guidance, which is a good thing, but also is really confusing for a lot of choice schools because there were these documents out there forever that they would get in trouble if they didn't follow, and now they kind of have to rethink how they do some of that. A second example I'll give of will protecting choice schools from DPI overreach is a case out of St. Paul's Lutheran School in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. In that case, the school was using their own form to document parent consent of special needs services. So this had to do with the SNSP program. The form that had been used on several students had actually passed several audits without issue. But then, one day, the DPI auditors realized that the school was using their own form and not a form that they created. And I would like to note that the form that they created was a preferred form that was not required by statute. And they ended up denying special needs scholarship funding for students totaling over $30,000. A lot of these schools don't have that many students. That is a lot of money, especially for DPI to withhold and bully these students and parents and schools out of. So Will sent a request for a hearing to the DPI, arguing that according to its own rules, the preferred form is optional. The school had met all of the requirements for this parental consent for the special needs scholarship program, and the DPI immediately caved and gave all the money back. So these are important examples of why schools need to stand up to this DPI overregulation and overreach, and Will is here to help them do just that. All right, so the last thing I want to touch on this evening is decoupling. And this is a really complicated topic, so I'm going to keep it pretty high level. But another plug is we have two separate decoupling sheets, studies in the back there if you want to grab them that go into a little bit more detail with some math on them. Math scares me a little bit, but it is important for understanding the issue. And I think it's also really important because this would directly affect this property tax issue that's happening right now in Green Bay. So under Wisconsin's current funding system, schools are funded by state aid and property taxes, local property taxes. Whenever the school district does not get in state aid, whatever it doesn't get in state aid, it can make up for in property taxes up to a certain amount, which is referred to as the revenue limit. That's a little bit confusing, but essentially in communities where property values are higher, they get a little less state aid and there's more property taxes that go into the school. And the opposite is true. When the property values are a little bit lower, the state gives more money and the property taxes don't have to come up as much. Where things get a little more complicated is adding choice students. So right now, state aid is reduced to the public school by the amount of each voucher student. This means that the school district could, and almost always does, then increase their property taxes to make up for that reduction, even though the public school is no longer educating those students. So essentially they're getting the same amount of money, but they don't have as many students. It doesn't make any sense. This also means that public schools aren't actually losing any money by these choice students. And there's a lot of conversations in Wisconsin about money following the kid, which is what Chris referred to and a lot of people in our movement refer to as backpack funding. Money stays with the kid in their backpack and goes to each school. You can think about it that way. So a proposed system to fix all of this would be to decouple choice schools from the property tax system altogether. Under this system, students that receive a voucher from the state to attend a choice school will be fully funded by the state via the General Purpose Revenue, or GPR. The public school district then would receive aid to fund public school students, with no reduction for students utilizing school choice, and therefore there would be no reason to increase property taxes to make up for students utilizing the choice program. Big quotes there because, again, the public school is no longer educating those students, so there's nothing to make up for. Opponents to this decoupling system give the most interesting reasons for why they don't want this to happen. they'll say things like, and I got these critics, what they're saying, from a slide that was recently used at an event opposing decoupling. They'll say things like, decoupling would insulate the school choice program from a constitutional challenge. Okay, so decoupling will strengthen school choice in Wisconsin and make it more difficult to bring frivolous lawsuits challenging the program over and over? Weird. All right, I think that's a good thing. They would also say that decoupling reduces sticker shock. Okay, so it makes it harder for opponents to manipulate this final line item of how much money it costs for students to attend choice schools. Interesting. That's an interesting claim. By the way, this is what's happening right here, right now in Green Bay with this property tax line insert. If decoupling happened, they would not be able to put that insert in your property taxes because the choice schools would be completely separate in a separate funding stream from the property taxes. They're also concerned about the fact that they can no longer opine on how much money this costs the taxpayer, which is a really interesting take for them to have considering all the other programs that they don't care about at all costing taxpayer money, but that's fine. If you can't tell by my sarcasm, all of these critiques are just ways of saying that decoupling would greatly benefit both the public and the private schools in Wisconsin. To further drive this point home, I would like to add that the Milwaukee Parental Choice Program is already decoupled. It already does not use property tax. It's not tied to property taxes at all. This isn't a new system, this isn't a new idea, this has been around for a long time. It's something that has already been successfully implemented in Milwaukee. And even Tony Evers himself said when he was superintendent that vouchers are a state program. If we're going to have vouchers, it should be paid for by the state. He suddenly doesn't like decoupling anymore now that he's governor and actually has a say in that, but that's okay. So this is really a win for public schools, it's a win for choice schools, and it's a win for taxpayers. It's a win for public schools because by increasing funding certainty and reducing the complexity of budgeting, they don't anymore have to raise taxes for choice students, which again is a misunderstanding of the concept to begin with, but it just simplifies and clarifies everything. It's a win for choice schools because it provides a more simplified and transparent funding mechanism for choice schools. And it's a win for taxpayers because every single school district with choice participating students would see a reduction in their property taxes. So, I know I kind of just fire hosed you all, but I am open for any questions that you may have, and if Chris wants to come up and answer any questions you guys have for him too.